Hey everyone, and welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. Today, we're going to be looking at SoundHound AI, ticker symbol SOUNN. I know that they're really making some noise in the AI space right now,
Mm.
especially with all this voice and conversational technology stuff that's going on. SOUN had a pretty crazy day yesterday, jumping over 23% to close at $16.91. But, you know, as we all know, one day doesn't really tell the whole story, does it? So to help us figure all this out, I've got our market expert here. They're really amazing at helping us see the connections between what the market's doing and the bigger economic picture.
Glad to be here.
So SAUN has been all over the place lately, swinging between $13.63
hmm
and $17.29 just yesterday. And analysts are predicting all sorts of prices over the next 3 months, anywhere from $3.13 to $5.07. I mean, that's a huge range. What is going on with this stock?
Well, the whole market is kind of jumpy right now. With the Federal Reserve meeting coming up on December 17th and 18th, everyone's waiting to see what they're going to do about interest rates. A rate cut could really give the market a boost, but nobody really knows for sure. And then you've got all the worries about inflation and the economy in general. So yeah, investors are definitely a little nervous.
Makes sense. But here's something I think is really interesting. Even with all this uncertainty, there's a lot of excitement about growth stocks, especially in the tech sector. And SoundHound seems to be riding that wave. But is it just because they're in the right place at the right time? Or is there something more going on?
It's definitely more than just being lucky. SoundHound is being pushed forward by some very specific factors. Take NVIDIA, for example. They're a huge player in the AI field. And they're also an investor in SoundHound. And their latest earnings report was unbelievable. They almost doubled their revenue year over year.
Wow, that's a pretty big sign that there's a huge demand for AI solutions right now.
Absolutely. And you can see that same demand reflected in SoundHound's own success. They just announced that their AI system was able to handle over 100,000 customer inquiries for a major client, a Pivia Curtage. That's real-world proof that their technology is valuable. But what really makes SoundHound different is their approach to conversational AI. They're not just focused on simple commands and responses.
So how are they different from like Google Assistant or Alexa?
That's a great question. SoundHound's platform is designed to understand complex conversations. Conversations that go back and forth for a while. Think of it this way. Google Assistant and Alexa are like sprinters. They're good for quick tasks. But SoundHound, they're more like a marathon runner. They can handle those really in-depth, nuanced interactions. And they're also making a lot of progress with voice AI for specific industries, like automotive and hospitality.
That's really cool. So it's not just about understanding the words, it's about understanding the context and intent behind them.
Exactly. And this unique approach is getting a lot of attention. We're seeing some major investment firms taking notice, like Vanguard and BlackRock. They're two of the biggest names in investing, and they're both holding significant shares in SoundHound. These guys, they do their homework before they invest, so their involvement tells you that they see a lot of potential in SoundHound for the long haul.
It definitely gives you some confidence, seeing those big names involved. But I did see some news about some insider selling of SOUN stock recently. Is that something we should be worried about?
Insider selling can be a tricky thing to figure out. Sometimes it's just personal reasons, nothing to do with how the company's doing. But we do have to consider that some insiders might not be so optimistic
Yeah.
about the company's prospects in the near future. It doesn't necessarily mean they don't believe in the company's long-term success, but it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Okay, so we've got a mixed bag here. NVIDIA's success, SoundHound's accomplishments, big investors showing interest, and then this insider selling thing. How do we make sense of all of this, especially with the Federal Reserve meeting coming up?
Let's talk about that next. The market is pretty much expecting a rate cut
Whoa.
of 25 basis points, which would bring the target range to 4.5% to 4.75%. Historically, rate cuts has been good for growth-focused companies. It can lower borrowing costs for companies like SoundHound, which lets them invest more in their growth. And it can also potentially boost consumer spending, which
Wow.
could indirectly benefit SoundHound as well.
So potentially more good news for us,
Yeah,
if the Fed does what everyone's expecting.
potentially, yes. But the market doesn't always react the way you think it will. Even a rate cut could be seen as a bad thing if the Fed starts hinting at future economic problems.
Always got to keep us guessing. So before we get into SoundHound's financials, let's take a little deeper look at the company itself. What exactly makes their conversational AI so unique? How does it compare to the competition?
That's where things get really interesting. They're not just focused on understanding words, they're focused on understanding the meaning behind them.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
SoundHound's technology goes beyond just recognizing keywords. They've created something they call collective AI. It combines a bunch of different AI models together to get a really deep understanding of language and what people mean.
Okay, so what does that look like in the real world? Can you give me an example?
Sure, imagine you're using a voice assistant to book a flight. With a regular assistant, you might say something like, book a flight to New York. But what if you want to fly on a specific airline? Or you need to fly at a certain time? Or you're on a budget. It can get really complicated really fast. But with SoundHound's collective AI, you can have a much more natural conversation. You could say something like, I need to go to New York next week. I'd prefer a morning flight on Delta, and I'm trying to keep it under $500. Their AI can handle all those details. It understands what you're looking for, and then it finds you the best option.
That's amazing. It's like having your own personal travel agent.
Exactly, and that's just one example. They're using the same technology in all sorts of industries, like the automotive industry, where their voice AI can control everything, from navigation and entertainment to climate control and even car diagnostics.
So they're all about creating a more seamless and intuitive experience for the user.
Exactly. Now let's switch gears for a minute and talk about SoundHound's financials. Keep in mind that they haven't released their latest earnings report yet. That's not scheduled until February 26th of next year, but we can still get some insights from their previous reports and some key metrics.
What jumps out at you when you look at their numbers?
Well, their current earnings per share, or EPS, is sitting at Nataji $0.35, so they're not profitable yet. And their price-to-earnings ratio, the PE ratio, is currently at Nataji 48.31. This basically tells us that they're still in a growth phase, investing a lot of money in research and development, and trying to expand their market reach.
So they're focused on building for the future, even if it means they're not making a profit right now.
Right. And that's pretty common for companies in this space. The potential payoff from becoming a leader in conversational AI is huge, but of course there are risks involved. Those analyst predictions we talked about earlier, they range from $3.13 to $5.07. That really shows you how much uncertainty there is around the company.
It's definitely a big range. What factors are contributing to that uncertainty, in your opinion?
There are a few things at play here. The overall volatility in the market, driven by things like interest rates and inflation, definitely has an impact. But there are also company-specific factors. The competition in the conversational AI market is fierce. SoundHound is going up against some giants like Google and Amazon, and they have a ton of resources.
It's a bit of a David versus Goliath situation.
It is, but SoundHound has a few things working in their favor. They've really carved out a niche for themselves by focusing on deep, meaningful conversations. They also have a really strong team of engineers and scientists and a growing list of patents, so they're not to be underestimated.
So it's a high-risk, high-reward situation?
Exactly, and that's where things like falling trends and resistance levels come in. Think of resistance levels as hurdles a runner has to clear. For SoundHound, those hurdles are currently around $3.98 and $4.71. The stock has had a tough time breaking through those prices in the past.
So if the stock hits those prices again, it's like running into a wall.
Not necessarily a wall, but it's a point where there might be more people selling the stock, which makes it harder for the price to go up. It doesn't mean it can't break through, but it would probably need a big catalyst, like a major partnership announcement or a really impressive earnings report.
Okay, so these resistance levels are like signposts. They can give us some clues about where the stock might go next.
Yes, they provide some context for understanding how the stock is moving. And since SoundHound's stock is currently trending downwards, these resistance levels become even more important to watch.
So we've got this really interesting mix of things going on. We've got macro factors like the Fed meeting and the overall market sentiment. And then we've got these micro-level factors specific to SoundHound, like their technology, their competition, and their financials. It's a lot to take in.
It is. And that's why it's so important to do your research. We're just scratching the surface here.
But let's take a step back for a second and think about what all this means for our listeners. What should they be paying attention to in the coming weeks and months? What specific things should they be watching for with SOUN?
Well, first and foremost, that Federal Reserve meeting is a big deal. Whatever happens there could have a ripple effect throughout the market, including SoundHound. Beyond that, I'd say pay close attention to SoundHound's own news and announcements. Are they making big partnerships? Are they hitting their technological milestones? Are they making any progress towards becoming profitable? Those are the things that are ultimately going to determine their long-term success.
So we need to keep an eye on both the big picture and the little details.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked a lot about the company itself and its place in the market. But I think it's also important to look at who's investing in SoundHound. The types of investors a company has can tell you a lot about its potential.
Okay, let's dive into that. Who are the big players betting on SoundHound?
So we've got some big names backing SoundHound.
Okay, like who are we talking about?
Well, at the top of the list, you've got Vanguard Group and BlackRock.
Those are some serious players in the investment world.
Right. And they each hold a pretty big chunk of SON. Vanguard has about 6.39%, and BlackRock is at 6.30%.
That's a big commitment, especially from institutional investors like that.
It definitely is. It shows they believe in the company. These firms have whole teams of analysts who spend their time evaluating companies before they invest any money.
So they must see some real potential in SoundHound.
Exactly. And then besides those giants, you've also got Global Catalyst Partners, State Street Corp, and Geode Capital Management, all holding a good amount of shares.
That's a pretty diverse group of investors.
Yeah, it is. And that's a good sign. It means that SoundHound is attracting interest from all sorts of investors, from venture capital firms to more traditional asset managers.
So it's not just one type of investor.
Right.
Now, what about insider ownership?
Oh, yeah, that's important too.
The company's founders still own a lot of the shares, don't they?
They do. Majid Amami owns almost 39.5%, and Keyvan Mohajer owns around 33.7%.
So they're still really invested in the company's success.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can interpret this level of insider ownership in a couple of ways.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, it shows that the founders are really committed to the company, and they believe in its long-term growth. They have skin in the game.
Right.
But on the other hand, you could also argue that this much insider ownership might raise some concerns about transparency and potential conflicts of interest.
I see what you mean.
For example, if the founders suddenly decided to sell a lot of their shares, it could spook the market, even if they had perfectly legitimate personal reasons for selling.
Right, like that insider selling we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It's something to keep an eye on.
So it seems like the investor picture for SoundHound is kind of a mixed bag. You've got those encouraging signs like strong institutional backing, but also some potential red flags like the high level of insider ownership.
Yeah, it's all part of the bigger picture. Investors need to weigh all the factors.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today. From the overall market outlook to SoundHound's technology and financials and their investor composition.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But as always, this is just a starting point. Do your own research, weigh the potential rewards against the risks, and make informed decisions that align with your investment goals.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, we hope you found this conversation helpful. If you did, please consider subscribing to Investing Talk podcast, share it with your friends, and leave us a comment below. We always love hearing from you.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time, happy investing.